Hello and welcome back, guys, to Rabbit Hole Stories, where we today speak to a very, I think, current topic. And it's great that we had Jaran Mellerud, I think is the right name of pronouncing his name, on to talk about mining.
Yeah, mate. Do you know what? I'm a little bit fucking wound up about this whole mining thing and the FUD that's going on at the moment. So you've caught me in a bit of a bad mood with the whole mining side. The FUD is just like ridiculous. Like the same shit is coming out all the time about the energy use, and it was a great episode just to really counter that argument about energy, where it's coming from, how it's used, and the fact that Bitcoin mining is using already energy that would have otherwise been wasted, and you know. The whole idea around what you've been seeing recently in the Senate over in America, the whole proposed 30% tax on the electricity based on Bitcoin mining. This is a great episode to really actually get into the nub of it all around energy and the use of energy in mining. This guy we spoke to today, extremely intelligent, articulate about the whole mining side. He's based in Iceland, and he talks about a lot of the resources that Iceland has naturally got to produce energy for this use, for something that is, you know, obviously going to be life-changing for everyone, and that is Bitcoin. So sorry for the rant, Joël, but this is a topic now that is obviously red hot at the moment. Excuse any pun that might include in relation to heat and energy, but yeah, it's a good episode. So I think we should go straight into it before I get even wound up even more and go down this rabbit hole of energy and mining.
Welcome back, everyone, to today's episode of Rabbit Hole Stories. And this time around, we have Jaran here from Norway coming in to talk about mining. It's good to have you on. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for having me here.
Our pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
And I mean, the people looking or watching in the video version, you'll see Jaran is quite packed in. Obviously, you're far up north, as you just told us before we hit the record button. And you work for Luxor Mining and the Hashrate Index, right?
Yeah, so that's right. I live in Norway. I live in Oslo, but right now I'm visiting my parents. They live up in northern Norway, so I'm visiting them now. I grew up in northern Norway, and I work for Luxor. It's a Bitcoin mining services company, fully remote company. So we are located in the US, but everyone working remotely. So we have employees all around the world. We have a mining pool. We have a mining firmware. We also buy and sell mining rigs. We have a hash price derivatives. So lot of stuff. So I'm working with expanding Luxor's presence in Europe, and also we have the Hashrate Index where we publish Bitcoin mining research. We have a data platform for mining. So yeah, that's what I do.
Nice. And was you always into like energy, these kind of things, or was that part of like your rabbit hole story to get into the mining sector?
Yeah, it's actually part of my rabbit hole story. I
Nice.
became interested in energy after I got interested in Bitcoin actually. I
Oh, cool.
I studied energy management in university. I didn't choose it because I was interested in energy. I chose it because by choosing that program, I was offered to go to an exchange in Russia, and I really wanted to go to that exchange in Russia. So that's why I just chose energy management. Um, and by studying that, I became gradually more and more interested in energy. I was interested in Bitcoin way before this. So um, and I was offered, or I needed to write my master's thesis before I was and finish that course. So, and I really loved Bitcoin. I really enjoyed researching Bitcoin. I was deep in the Bitcoin rabbit hole at the time. So I decided, okay, maybe I can write about Bitcoin mining because Bitcoin uses a lot of energy through mining. I didn't know anything about mining. So I decided to just learn as much as possible about mining so I could write my master's thesis. That led me into the mining rabbit hole, and it also was the only thing that made me actually interested in energy. I studied energy management 2 years, never really interested me. Then with Bitcoin mining, I started to understand energy more, and I got my first job
Mm,
in the crypto space through my master thesis. I got a job for Arcane Research, so I did like some general research on the crypto market, very like market
nice.
related, like which coins are going up and down and all that stuff. But I was always mostly interested in mining. So now this autumn I started working for Luxor and Hashrate Index to focus 100% on mining. So that's how I got into mining. Can talk a little bit about how I got into Bitcoin. So this was a few years before I started the university, and
Yeah, sure, sure.
I
Let's go for it.
it was in 2017. So of course, all my friends bought Bitcoin. This was in the summer of 2017. Bitcoin was at $3,000. Some of my friends bought it at they had bought it at like $1,000 back in like 2016, and I was like, yeah, I am going to buy it myself. So I bought at $3,000, and then it went down to $2,000 one month later, and I panicked and I
Goodbye.
sold everything. And then I had to watch the rest of the year in 2017 as the Bitcoin price went to 20K. And I was so
No.
angry that I sold everything and watching all my friends who didn't sell, they uh, they earned a lot of money, and I was like, this is so stupid. I just hope Bitcoin would crash, and then of course it did, and I got into it in 2018 again. Uh, it was in 2020 I got really interested. Before that, it was just some speculative way to make money. But in 2020, I sat at home during the lockdowns, and I remembered I just I just came over this chart that showed the money supply going through the roof, and I was like, oh, now I understand this Bitcoin thing. Maybe I should get back to it and read more about it. So I just decided to spend the following summer of 2020, just studying Bitcoin full time. Normally, I used to work
Mm.
during the summer, but this summer I would only uh, research Bitcoin. So I did that and learn a lot about Bitcoin. Dabbled into some shitcoins as well. Was deep into DeFi, but now I'm only Bitcoin.
I mean, one could say the only decentralized finance is Bitcoin, right? So you're
Yeah,
onto the right track there. Um, that's super interesting. So, like, for more or less 2 years, it was more of like a speculative interest for you,
yeah.
and then it moved into mining. How many hours? I have to ask. How many hours did you spend on the mining rabbit hole then after getting Bitcoin? Because it's always a huge feat to get Bitcoin, and then you discover the rabbit holes within the
Yeah,
rabbit hole.
I have far from understood Bitcoin. The technical aspects of Bitcoin are
Of course, yeah.
extremely complex, and I only have like a general level understanding of that. But with mining, I try to go more deeply. I decided in about 1 year ago that I would like fully focus on mining. So that's when I started to like really deep diving into mining, and I spent, I would say, most of my time since then just reading about mining, trying to understand it. But it's not that complicated actually. But what I like about mining also is that it's a physical business. That you actually need to build the physical facilities. It's international business, so you need to like, think about which jurisdiction you will have your mining facility, where you will buy your mining rigs, um, all that stuff. So that really fascinates me. So in the crypto space, I would say Bitcoin mining is the only really like physical business aspect. Everything else is like in the cyberspace, but Bitcoin mining is in the meat space, and I think that's what interests me on about it.
Cool. Do you think like your background in the energy studies in school helped with it, or because it's? I think this is always one of the misconceptions if you read it in the mainstream media. Like it's solving mathematical problems, and you get all of these weird big numbers. But in fact, it's like you say, it's just one giant game of Oh fuck! I forgot the the English word for it. Sorry. Uh, what are the things you throw in the casino? Ian, you gotta help me out.
Yeah, lottery.
Chips? What do you mean?
Not the
Dice?
chips, the dice. Thank you.
Throw the
I was looking
dice?
for the dice. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just one guessing game at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what it is. You have these machines who just are constructed for one purpose only. That's why they're ASICs, application specific integrated circuits. The only thing they are designed for is to guess numbers as fast as possible through this SHA-256 algorithm. So the faster you guess numbers, the higher probability that you will be the next miner to kind of solve this puzzle or to guess the correct number. So it's all about the computing power, just amassing as much computing power as possible, and just dedicating that to Bitcoin. And to amass all this computing power, you need, of course, the machines. That's one component, but you also need the energy. You have them, you buy the machines, you just feed them with energy, and you get Bitcoin mining. That's what I also think is so fascinating, that Bitcoin is the most powerful computing network that has ever existed. Uh, and it's just this sheer usage of power, which is so fascinating to me, that you can have like all this power just dedicating to this one thing. So some people call it a waste, but I just of course I don't think it's a waste. I think it's more like fascinating that actually people are just using power on these machines to like get something magical from the internet. It's really, really crazy when you think about it.
Yeah,
And you can do it from anywhere in the world.
yeah, it's mind blowing because obviously the more competition there is, the more ASICs you need to obviously be like the person to come up with the solution. So obviously it becomes like a matter of you're competing with potential other miners getting that solution to that problem first. So this is where the whole energy FUD comes into play with Bitcoin energy and the environment. But you being in that space and you having all the knowledge you have on mining, what would you say to our Greenpeace listeners who are listening in right now and saying, "Oh, Bitcoin's it's melting the icebergs and all that sort of stuff"? How can we better as Bitcoiners try and understand and educate people about the whole energy environment
I
dilemma
would
and
first
debate?
tell them that they can't really do anything about it. Like even if they don't like it, they just have to accept that it's here. If they try to ban it in certain places, let's say, I mean, I live in Norway. A lot of climate activists here, they don't like Bitcoin mining. So what the Norwegian government did from the new year was increasing a power tax for data centers. And they obviously want to get rid of the mining industry. But even if they did that, let's say that they were successful and eliminated the mining industry from Norway, it would only lead to higher profits for miners in other countries, like Kazakhstan, where they use coal. In Norway, they use hydropower. So actually, they're shooting themselves in the foot by trying to get mining away from places like Norway or Sweden or Canada or wherever they use so-called green energy. So yeah, they can't eliminate it. It's decentralized. Like anyone can just buy an ASIC and use it, and then of course you can't get rid of it even if you wanted to. Even if they banned Bitcoin mining in all countries in the world, it would still be a lot of people mining Bitcoin. So they can't do anything about it. That's what I would say. But of course, from the perspective of Bitcoin adoption, a lot of people would, or a lot of Bitcoiners would want to get some like, climate activists on board. Um, but I don't really think it's necessary to try to convince them. I think most people they most people don't really care about Bitcoin's energy consumption. Is like when I talk about Bitcoin to some, like let's say I meet someone in Norway on the street that I was going to school with 10 years ago. They never talk about energy consumption. That's never something they care about. I think the media is trying to make it into a bigger deal than it really is. And yeah, maybe some investors will not invest in Bitcoin because of that, but that's their loss. I think Bitcoin is going to succeed anyways, and the only thing these investors will achieve by staying away from Bitcoin is that they will buy it later. So uh, once again, they're just shooting themselves in the foot. So I'm not worried about that.
It's almost like energy's become a bit of a swear word. It's a bit of a taboo. Like it's like energy is a bad thing. We need more energy,
Yeah,
and I think Bitcoin is one of the leaders in coming up with new innovative technologies and ideas about how to generate and you know, produce energy that we need to do that. Partly because of the FUD that's been put out. We're like, well, okay, well, fuck you. We're going to show you how we're going to circumvent your potential sort of sanctions or whatever it is that you're trying to sort of put in place. But also, like, you know, that's the whole ethos of Bitcoin, right? It's to do better, and it's to have a system that is fairer for all, and it's only going to be natural in a deflationary environment, and the abundance that comes from it, new technologies and the competitiveness of mining is only going to force new innovation in that space. I don't know if you would agree
I
with
think
that,
so. Yeah,
either one of you.
I think Bitcoin is one of the only real innovate, or at least is pushing some innovations in the energy space more than anything else. Like we have basically two forces that are like pushing innovation in energy. It's one is the government subsidies, which are going into some like solar farms or wind farms and all that stuff. That's not really working. Like for example, Germany, or all countries which have made wind and solar a significant part of their grid have very expensive energy. Um, Batteries also haven't gotten that much cheaper because we see now in the energy crisis, because it requires a lot of energy to produce batteries. So,
Yeah.
these innovations which the subsidies are pushing are not haven't really worked. And then we see Bitcoin, which is Bitcoin mining, which is the other like source of innovation in the energy industry. That's actually driving some real efficiencies in the energy industry that is not only forced through by use of subsidies. So these are actually innovations that are coming from bottom up and being implemented because they are more cost effective, for example. So I know about miners who have operated in Central Europe before the energy crisis. They were installing Bitcoin mining containers like directly at some natural gas power plants. And by having this Bitcoin mining load at the natural gas power plant, they were able to really quickly adjust the
Yeah.
power supply from this power plant into the market. So instead of regulating the natural gas power, they could just regulate the Bitcoin mining load, and from that regulate the power supply into the grid. So that helped the power plant. It's also helped the energy market in the location. We see Bitcoin miners helping finance wind and solar power plants. Uh, we see Bitcoin miners helping prevent natural gas flaring. That's going to be pretty huge. So uh, yeah, I think Bitcoin mining is probably the biggest driver of innovation in the energy sector right now, except of course for all the government subsidies.
And I think being in Iceland as well, you've got quite a lot of natural resources that can produce energy, right? So you've got hydro and geothermal energy in Iceland, which you can use to take advantage of, you know, in terms of getting natural energy. Am I right in thinking that? And if so, can you explain about what those two things are and how those things are harnessed, or is that going to be too long-winded of an answer.
I can. So Iceland was one of the first countries that saw a like big Bitcoin mining industry. And the reason that was around 20, I think as early as 2014, the earliest facilities sprung up in Iceland. And the reason for that is, of course, since Iceland, it's an island like far up, far away from the rest of the world. Uh, all electricity which is produced in Iceland stays in Iceland. It can't be transported away. And Iceland has a certain potential for generating energy that's hydro and geothermal. So they have massive potential for generating these resources, but it only lives 370,000 people there. So Iceland has the biggest electricity generation per capita globally. It's almost twice as much as number two on that list, which is Norway. Um, so what should Iceland use all this electricity for? Should they just have like Christmas light all year around, and or should they actually use it to produce something? So the way Iceland historically has kind of exported their electricity is by manufacturing aluminum, because aluminum production is extremely electricity intensive. So by having all these aluminum smelting facilities, Iceland can like direct their electricity into that aluminum and then just ship the aluminum away from Iceland. So it's kind of um, they uh, transport their or export their electricity in form of aluminum. Bitcoin mining is very similar to aluminum in that it's a very electricity intensive industry. It's even more electricity intensive than aluminum. So Bitcoin mining is the most electricity intensive industry in the world, actually. So around 70 to 80% of the like variable cost of Bitcoin mining is electricity. So what better way is it to kind of export electricity um, without using cables than Bitcoin mining? It's better than aluminum. That's why Bitcoin mining has grown a lot in Iceland, and the Icelandic people they understood it because they already had like exported energy through aluminum smelting. So there was like, yeah, we can do it through Bitcoin mining. Um, so and it's a not a coincidence that hydropower is the biggest energy source in the Bitcoin mining network. That's because hydropower is very often stranded, like in Iceland. We also, where I am now in northern Norway, we also have a lot of stranded hydropower. So Norway is a very long country, lots of mountains, so it's very, very hard to build transmission lines. So we have all this hydropower that is produced in northern Norway that can't be transported to the south. That's why energy is extremely cheap here. That's why we have a lot of Bitcoin mining facilities in northern Norway. That's also why Bitcoin mining was big in China. It was located in these regions of China where they have a lot of excess hydropower. So that's why Bitcoin mining also is big in Quebec in Canada. They have a lot of excess hydropower there. Um, Bitcoin mining is also, we see some growth in Africa right now, and the only miners we know of in Africa, they're also using hydropower. So hydropower is a very, very good energy source for miners because it's relatively consistent, like wind and solar. A miner can't rely on wind or solar alone because it's not consistent. It's extremely variable. But hydropower, a very stable energy source. Uh, and you also have the problem with stranded energy. With, for example, the reason why Bitcoin miners are using mostly renewable energy, hydro, over, let's say, coal, it's not because they care about the environment. So they don't like do it to be kind. They do it actually because the cheapest energy you can find is stranded renewable energy. Um, for example, coal, you can transport coal. If you live in, let's say, in Australia and you produce a lot of coal, you don't need to consume that coal exactly where it is. You just ship it to a market which is more expensive. So fossil fuels will always be quite expensive for miners.
Sorry, I just had to double check what my dog is doing. Not that he's barking in the middle of the interview. But you catched up there on a few good points. The Africa topic, I want to dive down into this one a bit later on. But one of the things I love about the FUT online, and Ian, this was actually a reply to one of your tweets, where one guy was like, oh, what do you do with Bitcoin if no electricity is around anymore? And I think he was thinking about like...
Oh, that peanut, I mean, that person, yeah.
He was thinking obviously of grid power, grid electricity. And I sort of replied to him, if you want to go really hardcore, you can transmit Bitcoin via radio waves. But with the energy thing, even if like the main grids are off, and it's very unlikely that that happens all around the world at the same time, right? We still have these renewable energy sources, especially in Bitcoin mining. Like if you are to a hydro station, the energy is always there. You can always keep going, producing new Bitcoins. And if it's a question of like if the nodes are keeping up, also there enough people I think around the world have energy sources which keep going even if like the main grid goes off. And then the second answer was, but you're wasting energy. And because we have you as a mining expert here, can you maybe go down it that it's actually impossible. It's not like we plug in these things, they go into the ASICs and the energy is like gone because it's being transmitted. How do you, as someone who's working in the industry, explain to people that energy is not actually wasted? It's, in my opinion, transformed into probably one of the strongest networks in the entire world. But I want to give you the stage in doing it in your own words.
Okay, so you can view it in a few different ways. So one, from the energy producer's perspective, or the like owner of the energy, if the owner of the energy sells energy to a miner, why is that energy wasted? The seller got paid for the energy, so that's not a waste. Energy waste is only if you don't get paid for it. That's when it's a waste in my eyes. And two, in many cases, when energy is very cheap, and you need very cheap energy for Bitcoin mining, you need extremely cheap energy. You can't mine Bitcoin like in Germany, for example. That's too expensive. So that's why miners are located in like northern Norway, where it almost doesn't live any people. They need extremely cheap energy, and cheap energy is cheap exactly because there is very little demand for it. So it's usually energy that otherwise would have been wasted. Let's say in northern Norway, for example, um, if you have power plants which are just hydropower plants which are just letting the water through without using it to generate electricity, that electricity could have been used for a lot of other things. So that electricity would be wasted anyways. And the third point is who are you to say that what is energy, what is wasteful activities? Um, I don't think that any one person could sit there and like decide what others should find valuable or not. It's totally subjective. I think that uh,
Mm.
like a lot of TV shows are garbage, but I don't go there and say that people shouldn't be allowed to watch them because it's waste. That should be up to them to decide.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at these reports, like the one coming out of Cambridge, I know this is always heavily debated in like the environmental Bitcoin space and stuff. Like the whole Bitcoin mining industry is what, like a tenth or maybe like a 15th of what just the data centers put out in energy waste to get YouTube up and running. So, whenever I speak to a lot of my friends who are in that weird Greenpeace, Fridays for Future generation thing, I'm asking them, well, are you throwing your phone away? Like, are you canceling like your Google subscription to YouTube Premium, Because they're wasting way more energy on, let's face it, idiotic stuff. I like YouTube.
I want to know how much energy porn uses.
Yeah, good point.
I
Good
actually
point.
saw I saw a statistic on that, and it uses at least as much energy as Bitcoin mining.
I can imagine. There's a whole lot of wankers in the world.
Literally, if you have that statistic, Jaran, I would like to link that in the show notes. If you
Yeah,
find
I think
it.
I think it comes down to fundamentally a lack of knowledge from the general population as a whole about what energy is, where it comes from, and how it's produced, whether it's natural or artificially generated. And then they just grab onto this sort of bit of FUD as if it's like, you know, the facts of everything. And yeah, it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of where energy comes from. I wanna go back a little bit about your Bitcoin rabbit hole story, if that's okay, and step away from this a sec. But what I'm always curious about is what was your kind of aha moment in Bitcoin? When did that sat in your mind drop to be like, Bitcoin's something different? Because I know you speculated on it at first, like I did, and a lot of people who get into this space do. But there was obviously at some point in your journey where you thought, you know what, Bitcoin is something special. And what was that for you?
I had some people I was talking with who kind of I looked up to as mentors. So they had been in the space for a few more years, and what I noticed was that all of them were Bitcoin maxis. It was like they didn't understand why I was dabbling with all the shit coins. And so that's one thing. I noticed that all the smart people in the space were Bitcoin only. And then I sat there one day with like my portfolio of 20 shit coins, which I thought would like be diversified. I had like a portfolio of cryptocurrencies, and I spent like every Sunday I went through that portfolio to like maybe change some things, and I noticed I spent like 4 hours every Sunday, and I constantly had to worry about this. I was constantly checking the prices, and one day I just decided like, oh, this is not for me anymore. It's too much work. Uh, I would just stick with Bitcoin, and uh, and then I sold all the shitcoins, only held Bitcoin, but I was still not sure that I did it mainly to save myself the work of needing to keep attention to all these things. I was still like, yeah, maybe like Ethereum is uh, something of value. I still didn't understand that. So I still thought that just because something was a cryptocurrency, it meant that it's decentralized. I was thinking like that, but I then I understood that not all cryptocurrencies are decentralized, and yeah, that's basically the realization. I understood that decentralization is the real innovation of Bitcoin. It's not about the technology, and it's you can't replicate it because it's the whole network which has slowly grown together. Um, and you can't just like bootstrap a cryptocurrency and like have an ICO and then suddenly you have like a cryptocurrency. It's not work like that. So actually, I think Bitcoin is the only cryptocurrency. Like maybe there are one or two others that are at least a bit decentralized, but I don't think so. I think no proof of stake coins at least are decentralized. Some people like, for example, Monero, but I've never really been into all that, all these other coins. So I'm just comfortable holding on to Bitcoin.
I just wanted to ask because I know a few minor people, like they work, specifically maybe in the mining analysis world, or they work in like a mining facility, and a lot of them tell me like, obviously Bitcoin number one, but they appreciate other proof of work coins. And I just wanted to ask you before you finished your statement, if something is a proof of work coin, Monero for example, does that go into that bucket for you where you say, okay, it's a cryptocurrency, but at least I appreciate that they use the right consensus model?
Yeah, kind of. I also like Monero, for example. If I could hold one other coin, probably it would be something like that. But I think mostly if miners say
Mm,
they like other proof of work coins, it's basically because they can mine them. They can make money by mining them.
mm.
Um, so yeah, that's basically it. But
I mean, at least some work went into it, right? You were not part of the early team and just got lucky with the pre-sale.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like for example, Monero, it actually was created for a purpose, and it actually has a purpose. It has probably the biggest use case of any cryptocurrencies right now. It's used in the dark web, which is so it's
Hmm.
actually used for transactions, probably more than Bitcoin. So yeah,
Hmm.
quite good of Monero there.
Yeah, I think a lot of early Bitcoin maxis I met are also appreciating stuff like Litecoin, for example, because they go, at least it has some, not even use case, like at least it makes sense that it is there somehow. And I think a lot of Bitcoin maxis would agree with that. Like they would not hold it obviously, but at least it fulfills something rather than just filling the pockets of the people who invented the idea behind it.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. But uh, I think at least for in my case, I like to not only hold Bitcoin, I also own stock. Uh, I kind of uh, I'm not only into Bitcoin. I have other like
Hmm.
investments too, but Bitcoin is my favorite investment. So I look from my side, I look at Bitcoin as an investment. That's why I like Bitcoin, and also of course because you can mine Bitcoin.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you because I remember that tweet when you put it out. Because Ian and I, even though we like the Bitcoin ethos and everything, I'm also very much involved in my day job in the industry. But I think sometimes we tend to just obsess with so idiotic things like is that BIP important, or like should we stay on Nostr or Twitter, where I think like just stay on both and educate people on both fronts. um, and I like that you were honest enough to go out there and say like, hey, it's okay to be like your own only cryptocurrency or crypto like currency. I mean, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies is a different topic, I think. But it's also good to have like your stock options. It's good to have maybe if you're into bonds and such, and just diversify on that front as well. Um, I guess if I would need to look at your portfolio, you're probably also into some energy stocks then, or some energy figs outside of the Bitcoin space.
Yeah, I am, and that's of course because I'm just bullish, long-term bullish on energy. Uh, and I also believe it's smart to diversify. I also believe that
Mm.
Bitcoin price will probably continue to increase over the long term. Um, I think we will see hyper Bitcoinization one day. Uh, but I still think it's smart to be at least a little bit diversified. But I appreciate the point some people made on my tweets that they own Bitcoin, they hold
Hmm.
everything in Bitcoin, 100% Bitcoin, because it's so simple and they don't need to follow up that investment. They know that they actually have the Bitcoin. If you have money in the bank, you need to be aware that the bank can actually just confiscate your money. Maybe you fail some KYC and they just decide, oh, now the
Yeah.
money is not yours anymore. With stocks, you need to pay attention to the different companies. It requires a lot of time. I've heard a rule that you need to be able to spend at least 1 hour of research per stock you own. Even with an index fund, it requires some like work to at least
Mm.
stay a little bit updated. With Bitcoin, you just own Bitcoin. You're confident that it will increase over the long term, and you just hodl it. That's also the beauty of Bitcoin. So a lot of people would say that Bitcoin is a lower risk investment than, for example, stocks, and I kind of agree. But I still like to.
I always find it funny how sensitive people are about where you decide to put your own money. People get really offended about people putting their money, wherever they choose to put it, and you should put everything in Bitcoin, particularly if you're talking about the sort of toxic maxis, which we've discussed many times on this podcast, and the politics that sit behind it sometimes. But if you're into mining, into energy, you understand it more than most people. So of course, you can sort of put your money where your mouth is in what it is you actually do day to day, and people shouldn't really give a fuck about that at the end of the day, right? That's that. You know, what do you say about that?
Yeah, yeah, of course, I agree that it's up to people what they want to invest in. It's their business. Uh,
Mm,
I
mm,
can talk a little bit about my like general investment philosophy. And like the reason I invest in energy stocks, for example, is because I like to invest in things that go against the like established narrative. When I because I think that that's the best way to make money, because you know that the stock market is priced according to the narrative. So, for example, investment banks, big investors, institutional investors, they are not often not allowed to invest in certain things. They have all this bureaucracy, these mandates that are increasingly politically driven. So, for example, they're not allowed to invest in coal. But you see which energy source have increased the most over the last year. It's coal. I think the coal price increased by 500% in 2022. I unfortunately didn't invest in it. Um, and I think also a lot of these energy policies are going to lead to soaring energy prices, like continuously increasing over the next few years. So it's of course good to be exposed to that. Uh,
Yeah.
Also from a diversification perspective, because if energy gets more expensive, then everything else
Mm.
will get more expensive, and you might struggle just to buy basic necessities if it gets really bad. So, but at least by owning energy stocks, you will have exposure to that increasing price. So if they increase, maybe everything else in your life is like going to shit, but at least you have these energy stocks which have increased. So that's why I like to invest in these things, and that's also why I invest in Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is kind of a bet against the established system. And
Mm.
would I be going too
yeah,
far to say investing in energy is indirectly investing in Bitcoin in some way, or am I just sort of being a little bit sort of pie in the sky here?
I think that's maybe a little bit
Yeah,
too far.
I'll rein myself in a little bit.
But you have a lot of the same people who like to invest in Bitcoin and like Bitcoin mining. They also invest in energy. So you kind of see the same. And also, Bitcoin mining and energy has a lot of similarities because both are extremely cyclical industries, um, and where it's very important to time the cycle. And the only way to time the cycle is actually to do the opposite of what most people do, uh, to go against the narrative. So you have to be a contrarian investor if you're going to do well in mining and energy.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole investment space called the alt investment space, alt for alternative. There's actually quite a lot of family office and such in the US, which like boomed in the last 4 years. And this can be anything from like, you mentioned coal before. People who invest into coal, they made a good bargain now with that return. And that can also be things like, collecting, I don't know, collectibles, sneakers, whatever it is. Everything at the end of the day can be traded, which is fascinating to me as well in the mining industry, Yaran. The hash rate derivatives and all of these products, like how far involved are you in these kind of things, or do you think this is still kind of a niche thing within the industry, or could that be something in the near future where people who might be interested in energy stocks and products would look at this and go like, okay, I'm not maybe not interested in Bitcoin at first, but I'm interested in essentially buying power at a certain price and betting on it to go up in the long run. Do you think this is getting more out there, or is it still somehow of a inner circle thing?
Okay, so yeah, most of the Bitcoin miners, they haven't usually used any derivatives until now. They haven't hedged. They have just thought number go up, uh, and yeah, basically didn't do any risk management. I think that's going to change. with all these miners going down during this bear market uh, due to poor risk management. I think a big theme in the next cycle will be to establish proper risk management and learn the best practices from other commodity producing industries, like, for example, oil and gas, or um, even gold mining industries like that. Like a gold mining company, they usually don't hodl gold. They sell the gold. They just mine it. I guess some of them hold it, but I think most of them just sell it. And that's what their real mission is as a gold mining company, is to produce gold as cheaply as possible and sell the gold for a higher price than the cost of producing that gold. And I think the Bitcoin mining industry is moving in the same direction, that Bitcoin miners are just trying to capture the spread between the Bitcoin price and the cost of producing one Bitcoin. Meaning that holding Bitcoin as like a side, it's like a side activity. It's not really generating any value anyways. It's like I don't need to buy a Bitcoin mining stock to hodl the Bitcoin for me. I can hodl it myself. So that's going to be a big thing. And also these companies are going to be using derivatives. Luxor recently launched the first hash price derivative, which lets miners fully hedge their revenues. So it's the only product that lets miners hedge their revenues. So hash price, that's the most important revenue metric in Bitcoin mining. So uh, hash price is the expected value per day of one unit of hash rate. So let's say you have one petahash of capacity. The hash price is currently around $70. So if you have one petahash, you will you will have a revenue of about $70 for that petahash by just running your machines for that one petahash for one day. But that hash price, it's very volatile because it's dependent on three different factors. One is the Bitcoin price, which is very volatile. Then you have the difficulty, and then you have the transaction fees. So as these three factors vary, the hash price is very, very variable. So just because a miner can earn $70 a day from their hash rate today, doesn't mean that it will be able to do that in 1 month. Maybe in 1 month it will only earn $30, but the miners still have costs to pay. So hash price derivative, it allows the miners, for example, to sell the forward or the future of their hash price and just have a stable revenue for 1 month, for example. So we are very excited about that product, and we think it's going to be used by a lot of miners, and it can also be used by investors just to get exposure to the hash price. It's like the only way to get pure exposure to the hash price. So
And I guess, because what I imagine is the mining industry is obviously also very much involved with outside capital, whether that be, venture capital, infusions through different sorts of allocations and stuff. Somehow the hash price is also a guarantee or like a security for them. Like, let's say they give you like 50 million and they say like, okay, we know like we're in the bottom of the bear market, for example, so it's a good time to get in. We'll try and cash out as much as possible in the bull runs up there. The miner at the end of the day only has to worry about staying liquid and I guess not getting too greedy, because somehow that price can always be used, as you said, as a hedge for their own sanity and possibly also for venture capital or just outside liquidity that comes into the whole space. That's quite interesting. That like it's in itself, it's a hedge for the miner, but you can build so many products on top of this just by essentially turning on a couple of computers and trying to find a puzzle for an orange coin. Like, I think if you get to that point in your journey in the Bitcoin world, that's
I'm only
quite
now
mad.
just seeing your mining rabbit hole now. I can understand how this is a whole different ballpark altogether. It's a rabbit hole within a rabbit hole almost.
Yeah, yeah, it is, and you will also find that inside mining is like also at least 100 different rabbit holes. That I could have spent. Okay, I spent my first year in like the crypto space. My first job, it was as a general crypto market researcher. I realized that this rabbit hole is giant. I was focused on all the cryptocurrencies, NFTs, mining, everything. It's not possible. You become extremely generalist, and then I started to focus on mining, or let's say Bitcoin only. And then you see within Bitcoin, it's like 1,000 different rabbit holes. And then you go into mining, and then you discover that within mining, it's like 1,000 different rabbit holes as well. So that's also what's so fascinating about this space and Bitcoin. It's uh, we are still figuring things out. It's still like being established, the different standards, how to do different stuff, and it's that's what's so fascinating.
I mean, I used to have other hobbies other than Bitcoin before Bitcoin came along. I'm just I'm just wondering what hobbies you used to have. That you obviously you're fully immersed in all these different rabbit holes at the moment.
Yeah, right now I'm too busy with the rabbit holes actually to have a hobby. I have a dog. That's basically it.
I just wanted to say the same thing. If you got an animal at home, whether it be a dog or a cat, you're basically halfway there.
Yeah, just don't forget to feed them.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course not. Of course not. That's at the top of the list. You probably feed your animals first or your dog first before you feed
Yeah,
yourself,
Bitcoin comes
honestly.
first.
You mentioned
Yeah,
you
yeah.
mentioned Africa before. Maybe if we can spend the remainder of the episode a bit there, because I think a lot of people, crypto market specifically as well, like they say like, oh, the next bull market is coming from Asia, like all of this in interest and such. This is already price focused, but I see a lot of development happening in Africa as well. Um, Recently, the investment by Jack Dorsey into Gridless, for example, in Kenya. But there's so many different avenues they can go down there as well. In the next 10 years, do you think Africa could actually contribute to a lot of the hash rate globally?
Yeah, I think so. I think there are places in the world which will see more hash rate growth. Like I'm waiting for the Middle East to have a lot of growth. I'm pretty confident we will see a lot of growth there in the next year or two. Also South America. But over the next 10 years, like in a little bit longer term, I'm confident Africa will see a lot of growth and it will probably grow into one of the biggest continents for mining. And the reason is because uh, it's a lot of reasons. One of the reasons is, of course, the young population in Africa that are quite open to Bitcoin and other innovations like Bitcoin. Um, so you have a lot of people without access to banking. Why should they go into banking? They will just go straight into Bitcoin. So people there are kind of more Bitcoin friendly than people in the West. They will be more accepting towards Bitcoin mining, and they will want to attract Bitcoin mining to actually, like, finally, we have some industries that want to establish themselves here. So they will be open to it. That's one thing. The other thing is just they have a massive amounts of energy there, energy potential. Uh, in Africa, there's an enormous potential for building hydropower, also geothermal energy. Both these energy sources are perfect matches with Bitcoin mining. You can use Bitcoin mining to finance the build out of these power plants. That's what Gridless is doing. There's also a big block in Congo, which is mining inside a national park in Congo with monetizing the energy from a hydropower plant with Bitcoin mining. I also know a miner in South Africa that is doing that. So you now have like a lot of smaller entrepreneurs in Africa that are developing this. I also read about Kenya's biggest energy company. They have a lot of excess geothermal energy, and they will use that for mining Bitcoin. So with all this excess or energy potential, of course, it's natural that you get a lot of Bitcoin mining, especially when you can use Bitcoin mining to finance the build out of these power plants. So yeah, I'm very bullish on Bitcoin mining in Africa.
Nice. And I guess it also helps with the, again, to fight the FUD, generally they attack a 14-year-old industry, which obviously you can't solve everything in that short of a time span. But if you think about all the possible renewable energy, especially that can come out of Africa, this puts Bitcoin mining probably at at least like 65% of the network being used by renewables. If all of them come on, maybe even more. I read something like 70% possibly in 2028, but I don't know what the current number is. There's a big debate going around that as well. But I got curious with your comment about the Middle East. What kind of energy resource would that be? Would that be renewable? Would that be fossil based, or what would that be?
It will mostly be natural gas that previously was
Okay.
flared. So yeah, as you know, in Middle East, enormous energy producers. They're the whole fundament
Yeah.
of this petrodollar system. So they have more than enough energy there. They actually have too much energy. Uh, and it makes sense that we see a lot of mining there because they're generally quite business friendly there, at least in like United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, countries like that, and quite stable. The only problem is the heat. So you will struggle. You need to use immersion cooling, which is basically putting the machines inside a liquid that cools them down. But that's a little bit more expensive. But yeah, mostly natural gas. Potentially also some solar power, some wind power, nuclear power. They're developing nuclear power plants in the United Arab Emirates that will lower the energy prices. Potentially, Bitcoin miners can locate like right close to these nuclear power plants and help these nuclear power plants to like regulate their supply to the grid because nuclear power it can only provide the base load. When a nuclear power plant is like producing exactly the same amount, it can't go up and
Mm,
down. But with mining,
mm.
like behind the meter at the nuclear power plant, they can just use the mining facility to regulate up and down. And of course, that's great for the energy system there. Um, so yeah, I think we will see Middle East will be we'll see the most growth there in the next like year or two, like year or two.
Cool. I mean, they emerged in the petrodollar. Maybe they'll upgrade now to the Bitcoin standard. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't see why they
Yeah,
should.
true. That's true. Uh, Yaron, I don't want to keep you up too long today or tonight. Is there anything we particularly forgot to ask you or you would like to share with the
Mm.
listeners before we wrap it up?
Mhm. Can't really think about anything.
Looks like we've done our job, Joel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you did your job very good.
No,
Thank you very
mate, it's
much.
an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it. But the whole energy and the whole mining side of Bitcoin is something I've really promised myself to sort of learn a bit more about. And I think you've teased me enough now to actually sort of dive into that rabbit hole a bit more. So you're to blame for now my new obsession about Bitcoin mining. And I hope our listeners have also enjoyed it as much as I have. And if you are listening, please subscribe, like us, bell notifications, you know the drill. If you can give us 5-star review, first some sats if you're really feeling generous on Fountain. And yeah, again, it's a weekly podcast and I hope everyone's enjoying it so far. Please give us any feedback if you feel that we need it. We're open to any feedback. And thanks again. Joel, you want to close up?
Yeah, thanks for being on, Jaran. And we'll see you and talk soon again.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was great.